presented here for your consideration the notion that the ordinary people surrounding you every day, on the street, the bus, at the post office, or the trendy evening venue, are, in fact, far from ordinary. That these men, women, and others form their own splinter groups behind closed doors, and that these micro-societies engage in activities often more obscure than fiction. Welcome to the Sub-Subculture.
Yes, hello, and thank you for joining us on the Sub-Subculture Podcast. I am your host and inventor of edible toilet paper, Andrew.
And I'm Joe, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
Send me back to the past. Very good.
I don't like this toilet paper.
If only I could eat it.
It shouldn't be edible. How are sales? Are you a rich man?
No, I think it's confusing people.
Right.
It's not been made clear that it's for eating or wiping. You don't need to do both in one transaction.
Oh, right, I see. Because if you do both, you're somewhat committed to a particular order. Because once you've eaten it, you can't really wipe, so...
Or is it, actually, I'm missing a gap in my marketing there. Is it therefore self-wiping on the way out if you just eat it first?
Ah, now that is an invention. That ought to make you millions.
Ought to.
Remind me, what's this episode about?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is it toilet paper?
What are we talking about today? We're not talking about toilet paper, although we've spent disproportionate amount of time recording talking about toilet paper.
Wasting your valuable time, listeners.
We are talking about the mighty Morris dancer. But is this a time-honoured English folk dancing tradition or an overt display of racism?
Interesting.
An overt display of racism that's still being kept alive and preserved today. Some people don't want to give it up.
In the rural backwater corners of this country where...
Broadstairs, apparently.
Broadstairs?
That is a seaside town in Kent.
Oh, I've never heard of it. It probably goes to show how rural it is.
It's actually quite nice. Went to university somewhere near there. Broadstairs is where you would go for a day out if you wanted to go to the beach.
Oh, how charming.
Anyway.
What were your preconceptions?
Of Morris dancing. Now, I guess neither of us would be total outsiders or have a complete outsider's view because you will have seen this at some point in your life growing up if you're from the British Isles or England. Maybe, I don't know, it's not very Scottish, but yeah. If you grew up in for any length of time in England, you probably will have seen this. So it's not completely new. My view was that it's English folk music and dancing with bells and sticks and pork pie hats and waving your handkerchiefs about. I thought it was obviously old-fashioned, and if I had to guess initially, I would have thought it's not going to be that old, like not as old as we think. I was thinking, oh, maybe it came from like the 1700s, and I thought it was exclusively the domain of old people. I don't think I've ever seen a young Morris dancer, unless when you get into Morris dancing, it just saps the energy and the youth out of you and turns you into a grey husk of traditionalist preservation rights.
It's like being president for 2 terms, ages you by 25 years.
Yeah. Once you dance the Morris, you'll never go back.
My preconceptions were pretty similar to yours. I'd seen them in the streets, usually old people, and I thought, I guess it has to be traditional, but why do people like doing it? It doesn't actually look like fun. But, yeah, I love a ceilidh. I love a barn dance. I love a organised knees up like that. And I don't know why, but this looks slightly different. It looks a bit less energetic and a bit less vigorous and a little more forlorn, really. And
like exclusively the domain of lame, probably rained out summer festivals in England.
Yeah, well, you see them outside pubs occasionally, or just random sightings here and there, sometimes in places that they don't really belong, which is interesting. I met one person at my old work who was a attractive mid-20s woman, and one of her hobbies was Morris dancing, and I just could not wrap my head around it.
Yeah, fuck off. That's not real. That was someone's gran with like extensive makeup.
With heavy use of stem cells to preserve youth. I don't know. It was completely bizarre, and she's about the last person on earth I would have expected to be doing Morris dancing, or the last thing I'd expect her to do. But she seemed to enjoy it, and I suppose it was probably a family affair. I really can't imagine that she got into it entirely of her own accord, but maybe she did. I don't know.
Of her own accord, dragged into Morris dancing.
Surely not. But that was my preconceptions, and they have changed a little bit since doing the research.
Okay, interesting. So we should probably jump into a definition, and there's quite a good one from the encyclopedia here, because although it's spreading that way. But for our American listeners, North American listeners, you're probably slightly confused what the fuck we're talking about when we say Morris dancing. Although, as I said, Canada and the US, surprising number of Morris groups. But Morris dancing is traditional English folk dance performed in groups, often during spring and early summer festivals such as May Day. It features coordinated footwork, including steps, hops, and leaps, accompanied by bells strapped to the dancer's shins, props such as sticks or handkerchiefs, and live folk music. Pretty succinct, I would say.
Yeah, pretty accurate. Often with white clothing and funny hats, and sometimes these sort of tassels all over it as well. It's quite a distinctive look.
Should we have a little listen? I've got a small 10-second clip we can play in of exactly what springs to mind when I hear the words Morris dancing. Your head started going from side to side, the same as mine did.
Delightful.
That should give you a little flavour. So that annoying percussive sound is just lengths of wooden stick smacked together by the dancers. I think they're in rows of 5. They sort of alternate, slap their sticks. The jingly bells are from the bell pads on their shins, and they're all wearing sort of very white, slightly frilly shirts, trousers, and little black pork pie hats. And it's all danced in a very civilized little sad jig.
And that low bassy hum you can hear is the generator from the nearby roadworks.
If it's the English countryside, probably. There's quite a bit of wind noise there as well. I think it's clearly taken on someone's phone, but it was like a nice little clip to sum up exactly the miserable afternoons you'd be spending if you saw Morris dancing happening.
We're not shitting on it. We're still in preconception mode.
Just lightly teasing, let's say.
Lightly teasing.
But yeah, there's a few variations. There are different styles and variants that come from up and down the country in different regions. So this one, that sound was probably...
the sound of panties hitting the floor?
It seemed like it would be more like Cotswold Morris, which originated in Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire and surrounding areas. Most widely recognised form of Morris dancing, performed in white clothing, decorated with ribbons, bells, baldricks, and uses handkerchiefs or sticks.
There's different flavours, aren't there?
So that's the one we sort of heard. There's also Border Morris, which I think is more upbeat and is quite popular as well. It tries to look a bit more edgy. They've got like these sort of big rag coats. They've painted their faces usually, which we can come on to in a minute. There's a lot more of the stick thumping, and I think it has more use of drums in the background folk music, a bit more lively, and there's a lot of this kind of thing going on when they like bang their sticks together and shit.
It's a little more tribalistic looking.
Yeah, I think it sounds a bit more like piratey Irish folk music. It's trying to make Morris dancing cool.
Mm-hmm. Is that a modern version? A modern reimagining?
No.
It's traditional still.
Yeah, the Border Morris is still quite traditional with the rag coats and whatnot. And that's where some of the problematic use of blackface comes from.
Let's get into that later. We'll keep that for Dark Side.
Literally. There's also Northwest Morris, which is from the industrial regions of Lancaster and Greater Manchester, traditionally performed in processions through towns and villages. So that's maybe where you've got your clogs on and you're doing this kind of folky dance, but you're going from one place to another. There was someone from the 1800s who, to prove a point, Morris danced all the way from London to somewhere else over the course of multiple days.
What was the point he was trying to prove? That the bicycle is a much better form of transport?
Just keeping the old ways alive. That Morris dancing was,
I think people used to walk.
Fun, and people should do it.
Oh. So now it's a sort of novelty sideshow, English country fair kind of thing. It's quite strange. It always attracts onlookers. People generally seem pleased and embarrassed in equal measure to witness it, and it's kind of the butt of many social jokes, I guess. Once it's visible, not many people look at that and think this is cool. So it's a strange place to have ended up. It's a bit out of place, really.
You mean it's kind of an existential thing? What am I doing with my life if I've gotten into Morris dancing?
No, there's plenty of good things about it. Again, we'll discuss that more later. I wondered if we want to go into the history of it a little bit.
Yeah, please. Let's dive into the history of the Morris dance.
So first of all, the name Morris, where's that come from?
Why don't you tell me?
Great question, Andrew. Glad you asked. So it comes possibly from Moorish dancing, which was maybe imported from the Moors, but historians aren't really sure. Because it's such a rural folk tradition that's centuries old and was kind of individual to each village, it's quite difficult to nail down a real defining common ancestry to it all. So it's all quite chaotic and poorly defined.
So this, you said Moorish, which would not be the Yorkshire Moors. Yorkshire Moors! It would be referring to the people from Moorish lands, which would, back in the day, have referred to like Turkey, or it might actually have stood for anyone that was Muslim. If you think back to Shakespeare's Othello, they referred to him as the Moor of Venice. And
I believe it might actually be Moorish in Spanish, not Turkish.
The Spanish have a similar word, Morisco, as in they also called them Moorish dancers.
Oh, I see.
Open-Morris.org, which is one of the three kind of governing bodies of Morris dancing in the UK.
One of the three.
Oh yes, there's factions.
They probably have bitter rivalries.
There was some name calling. Feathers were ruffled. They reckoned that the English form of the word comes from the Flemish, Mooriske danse, but they are likely comparable words from languages like German and French and Croatian and Italian and Spanish, because they all were associating this sort of colourful, dressed up dancing as being something other. Like it always had to be from somewhere exotic, something else. That's why it was named in that way. What am I trying to say? That
our most precious English tradition was stolen from somewhere else.
Yeah, basically, like everything in the current UK. But it was made to sound deliberately exotic if you said it was, well, this is how the Moors would dance kind of thing.
Interestingly, the name Morris, I suppose it won't be surprising now. Morris is a common surname in the UK, and it's of Latin origin, commonly meaning dark-skinned, swarthy, or Moorish, derived from Mauritius.
There we go. Not Mauritius, surely?
Yeah.
As in that island off of Africa that would barely have been discovered.
Mauritania, yep. It's quite amazing, really, that there were African influences as far back. The first documented case, like a disease.
Someone first contracted Morris.
The first documented records of Morris dancing are from around 1448. So this is ancient. This is nearly 5 centuries old.
Yeah, that's the earliest written mention of it in English.
In fact, if I could do maths, I would say nearly 6 centuries old.
That reference in 1448 was talking about, I think it was the Goldsmiths Group of London, paying 7 shillings to a group of Morris dancers.
So they would stop.
Yeah. Paying them to fuck off. It's funny that the only reason we have a decent historical record of it is because someone kept the receipt.
Yeah, as good a reason as any. So it became common at village festivals, May Day celebrations and fairs during the Tudor and early modern periods as basically just entertainment and something villagers, peasants could participate in with a fairly low skill ceiling.
What are you talking about?
Sorry, low barrier to entry.
Yeah. I mean, you have to practice. You know, those sticks aren't going to coordinate hitting each other together themselves. There was some sources that you can find where people have really been kind of lazy. I think it was a Times article. No, it was that one that anyone can write something in.
The Sun?
Vice?
Oh, yeah, Vice. Vice used to be good.
Medium.
Okay.
I think anyone's allowed to write an article for Medium. Anyway, they just sort of go, oh, it's pretty old. I think it might be related to pagan festivals and to do with fertility rites and stuff like that. Like they were just banging their sticks together hoping it would make it rain. But fuck off, you idiots. You uninformed plebs. If we're talking about this having come from the 1400s, like England was a very Christian country, but like even had divided churches by then. They're not fucking out there doing rain dances, praying to the gods of fertility by banging sticks together and jingling their bells. That's absolute nonsense. It doesn't make any historical sense. It's just it's a celebration thing. It was, and that's exactly what you said. It appeared at festivals, usually like harvest festivals, May Day festivals, and the kind of miming movements are not there trying to pray to the god of harvest. It makes it look like I'm digging the soil with my stick. It's just because that's what you're doing at the time. It's got agricultural themes in seasonal dances. It's not because you think that jingling your bells left and right are going to make their plants grow better, you ignorant fucks.
I don't know if that's such a crazy idea, other than the fact it wasn't supported by any data, because there are other traditions over the years that are entirely around having good harvests that have come from pagan traditions. I mean, what period of time was paganism strong, and when did Christianity eradicate it or push it into the fringes?
The Romans?
How far ago were they?
It's like BC and early numbers.
Okay, quite a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do the science, you do the history.
England had been a Christian country for hundreds of years by the time we've got records of this shit.
By the time we've got records of this noble tradition. So by the 18th and 19th centuries, it was mostly performed by rural working men. It's traditionally been a male thing, which is interesting because it's hard to see from the outside why it would have to be limited to men, other than it was only men that were allowed to do anything fun for the first 3,000 years of human existence.
Briefly looking at the sort of gender politics in Morris dancing, I think a lot of articles were saying that the kind of contemporary newspaper accounts of women and girls being involved were from the late 1800s. So there's like a 400-year gap where we're saying it's mostly the territory of men.
And I think it's because it took place in and around pubs with drinking before, possibly during, definitely after, and pubs were a traditionally male space as well, and it kind of filled in a lot of stuff about camaraderie and male bonding and this kind of stuff, and I think it was a male preserve for that reason.
If I had to guess, I would say that it wasn't particularly exclusionist deliberately in those previous years. It's just that, as you said, the things that were done out of doors or allowed to be done. I mean, even if you look at the theatre, even the female parts were played by men in early Shakespeare stuff, because women had a different role in society then. So I'm not sure that Morris dancing was deliberately exclusionist of females. It just reflected the wider society that it was existing in.
Which was exclusionary.
Yeah.
For a long time, performance was considered the preserve of men, which is a really bizarre idea now, but that's what they thought. So by the late 1800s, Morris dancing was close to extinction. Why, you ask?
Why? Why would anyone give up Morris dancing? How could they let this happen?
How could they? So industrialization in the Victorian era, urbanization, and Victorian senses of respectability and decorum all converged to significantly impact Morris dancing. So England became one of the most quickly industrialized and earliest industrialized nations, and at one point 3/4 of the population were considered urban, which is a huge inversion from when it was mostly rural prior to this period.
Where have I heard that statistic before? That sounds like something that we might have discussed recently.
Oddly on topic. What could that be?
Continuity, time-wise here. I love it.
We couldn't have designed it. This is just chance.
Yeah, if you wonder what we're rambling about, go back and listen to the episode before this where we talk about Victorian facial hair, and we've got a bit of a timeline of the Victorian era there in the middle.
In the side quest. So enjoy that. We're going back to the Victorian times. This rural association, rural culture, rural communities, they all got depleted because people moved to the cities and it was a different culture within them, far more people, far more anonymous, and kind of the conditions that were needed that sustained Morris dancing and other folk traditions were knocked down, and Victorian nobility, who kind of set many of the cultural norms in society, looked down on rural traditions as barbaric and peasantly and crass and unsophisticated.
Yes, crass and bawdy and rowdy and things that a gentleman shouldn't be.
Exactly. And their stiff upper lip and ideas of respectability and sophistication put the kibosh on this.
I think it was the standard and the style of living as well as people moved into urban centres. It wasn't so much geared around the seasons. You kind of lived in this grey miasma of fog in a workaday in the factories grind for a large portion of the population at least, that it kind of didn't really matter. You know, it was a lot colder in the winter and you had to put up the heating if you could afford it, or else you just died in your slum housing. But if you've got 8 people cuddled into a room, maybe it's nice and toasty and warm. But you were less in touch with the kind of seasons, and this was sort of the domain of a seasonal festival, bashing your sticks together and jingling your bells because the spring was here and the winter was over. Whereas if it's constantly grey with fog and soot, you can't really see the outside anyway.
And all that matters is someone somewhere is doing some farming and the produce gets sent to London or Manchester or Birmingham or Liverpool or any of these big cities that boomed during this time.
I think people were just kind of more under the heel as well, just worn down by industrial jobs. I'm not saying that outdoor life was a fucking roll in the hay all the time for them, but there was a sense of
independence,
probably a bit more of a sense of independence and purpose. And this is why like the masculine identity struggled as well, because suddenly you were kind of becoming a cog in the machines that you worked on, rather than
you weren't your own man.
Yeah, and you weren't a part of a community that had things to celebrate together. You were just part of this kind of amorphous, sooty mass.
I think this is where a lot of the problems I feel that we have now started, was in the Victorian industrialization and even in cultural attitudes. So, for instance, in British culture, British humour, sincere enthusiasm is punished and mocked, and we reward irony. So things like Morris dancing are now considered inherently uncool because people are showing sincere enthusiasm for something, and it's all very easy for us to sit back and take pot shots at it, like we've been doing.
I don't know what Morris dancing videos you've been watching, but there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm on display in those.
No, actually, they did look a bit sad and shambly.
Grey-skinned skeletons that were sort of jingling their bones or their bells together. I wasn't sure which.
Yeah, rattling their bones. I don't know, but...
I'm only joking. It's only for jest. It's a noble art.
The point still stands, though, that we mock sincere enthusiasm, and it goes against our sense of British reserve. And people like Italians and Spanish, they are shamelessly enthusiastic about stuff, and I love spending time with those guys. They get so into the football or whatever it is. Football is probably the one cultural exception where we're allowed to be enthusiastic about something, only because it's also violent. That makes it okay.
Football's not inherently violent, it's inherently wussy.
But being a football fan, I think, you can't disassociate football from football violence. Football, the game, sure, it's the gentleman's game for thugs, unlike rugby, which is the thugs' game for gentlemen, of course. But football violence is inherent to the experience of being a football fan, I think, even if you don't participate. I'm just spitting out theories here.
That's what we're all about, unfounded theories.
Yep, having just mocked someone for ignoring lack of data.
I think your suggestion that women were not involved up to a certain point is supported by the reading, supported by the evidence on the Morris dancing group's websites themselves, and also reputed encyclopedia entries like Encyclopedia Britannica. And they said that there's been this kind of revival since the late 19th century when some scholars were kind of promoting the idea of Morris dancing and wanted to give it a bit more of a boost in popularity.
A chap called Cecil Sharp.
That's the guy.
Tell me about Cecil.
In 1899, he was a music teacher and folklorist, and he saw the Headington Quarry Morris men performing in Oxfordshire.
That's me.
Oh, hello,
Sorry.
Oxfordshire.
I am the county of Oxfordshire.
I thought you'd put on a bit recently.
How dare you? That's a thyroid problem.
Anyway, the stub says that he was struck by the spectacle of this Morris dancing, and he documented their dances and began collecting folk songs and dances across England. Sharp compiled nearly 5,000 tunes, 5,000 of them, and he founded the English Folk Dance Society in 1911 and shaped this early 20th century folk revival.
Now, what's really interesting about this is, in the effort to preserve Morris dancing, he also changed it, because historically, Morris dancing was a product of societal pressures and incentives, and it fit into people's everyday lives, and it was there, and it was something that they did. And they lived it organically. As times changed and it was dying out, and Cecil Sharp documented it, recorded it, formalised it, whereas it had previously been a quite chaotic village by village basis of how they did their dancing. By writing it down to preserve it for the future, people since then, because the pillars that held it up and made it possible have disappeared, since then it's no longer an organic thing that fills a community space. It is basically a hobby or a performed revival tradition that doesn't really fit into people's lives, but there's something about it that they like and they want to do.
He so by standardizing it, he killed off the free spirit of the early Morris dancers, you reckon?
Yes.
And kind of put in rules and said, okay, this dance and this particular set of steps is called this. Whereas if they were performing it at a village fete, it might have changed from one year to the next where this was taught down through the generations.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. But if he hadn't done that, it would have disappeared entirely, probably. So it's like...
Zoos.
It's almost like taxidermy. Yeah, we shot this animal and stuffed it and put it on the wall. And if we hadn't done that, it would have died of natural causes and we'd never be able to see it again. Here it is. In its natural environment, but dead as a doornail.
In his natural environment, my living room.
What a splendid beast.
I think your example is more extreme. I thought of zoos where the animals technically exist and are alive and are kept alive by this process, and people can go to them in the structured way and see them behind cages in a packaged manner.
Look, honey, it's Morris dancers.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be in cages soon.
Gosh, that cage looks small. Too big, if you ask me.
What are they? Are those bones that they're bashing together? Yes, previous Morris dance.
The femurs of an unfortunate Morris dancer.
But yeah, you're keeping it alive, but you're also stopping it from thriving in its natural environment.
Yeah.
Didn't think I'd come out with that comparison today. Morris dancers are like zoos.
It's a very good comparison, actually, because the natural environment that these animals lived in might have been destroyed by industrialization. It's actually a perfect analogy, Andrew. Well done. You get the Perfect Analogy Award for this week.
Yes. Can I have it to put on my fridge?
No, it's more of a theoretical sort of thing.
Oh, I thought I'd have something to show my parents and former teachers that they might at some point have been proud of me, but it's okay. I don't need that.
You know what? I'll knock something up in Paint and I'll have it over to you by the end of the week.
Thank you.
Print
I
it.
appreciate that. So it had a bit of a revival, albeit a caged one. Some sources that I read suggested that the mass participation of women in the troops of dancers grew in particular in the 20s and the 1920s and 1930s. I wonder why that would have been. Why would an almost exclusively male thing suddenly have to be picked up by females in the 1920s and 30s?
Was it because all the men were dead lying in a battlefield in France somewhere?
Yep. Due in part to 2 world wars killing off shit tons of men.
Yeah.
So older male dancers had to teach women the steps of the Morris to keep the tradition thriving.
Keep it alive.
Although, as I said, there are factions within Morris dancers. There are 3 main sort of, governing bodies, but 3 sort of organizational bodies that a Morris troupe can sign up with, maybe pay dues, and they will help organize the festivals or say who's playing where or this kind of thing.
It's very much the English version of the Hells Angels, really.
If you want to be an officially recognized Morris troupe, you have to sign up with the right organizing governing body.
You have to get patched over.
Outlaw Morris. Maybe we could start that.
Little callback there to a previous episode of ours, episode number 11.
Would you like me to find out?
Go and listen, listeners.
Would you like to know more?
I'd like to know more.
Episode 11, you're correct. So there are 3 of these bodies. The longest standing one, I think, is called Morris Ring, which was exclusively male until 2018. That's late. It's pretty late.
The most traditional.
Yeah. And the other ones that were founded more in the 1970s, surprisingly, where people wanted sort of more widely mixed recognition. Also, I think Open Morris, the more recent one, was open. It was formed in 1979. And there's also the Morris Federation, which had recognized mixed and female groups for longer than that.
Progressives.
Yeah, so progressive. Letting women dance.
They'll be wanting to vote next.
What forward thinkers, free radicals.
So that brings us up more or less to the present day.
More or less. I mean, it doesn't really answer the question of why would someone Morris? Why does one Morris? What makes a man turn Morris?
Money? Power? Women?
Or do you just like the sound of jingly bells?
So I think there's a few things.
I don't think it's any of those, though.
It's none of them. It's absolutely none of them. I think, based on my research, there's a few psychological drivers. One being simply belonging to a group, having a community. Kind of doesn't matter what it is. It's just, like, the dancing is not actually the important part of it. Like so many of the subcultures we cover, what it is on the surface is actually really not what it's about. And again here, a lot like the Hells Angels, it's about belonging to a tribe of like-minded people.
Well, hold on, wait. So you're saying that if these people didn't have Morris dancing, they would have just sort of belonged to the first other thing that snapped them up, like
Possibly.
curling or a street crime gang.
Yeah, those are the two other choices.
It's just as likely that they would have started hanging out around corner shops and knifing people for spare change.
Yeah,
So thank God Morris dancing keeps them off the street.
or repair sheds, that kind of thing, repair cafe stuff. Something else that's nice is participation in something, a bit of performance. It scratches an itch that many humans have to perform something with a low barrier to entry. And especially if you mix in an interest in identity and heritage, then, you know, if you've got a couple of these interests, then Morris dancing is kind of a convergence of them. And it even has a sort of mild countercultural identity, because Morris dancers know that many people find the tradition embarrassing or ridiculous, and it's super uncool. And some participants actually enjoy that status, doing something that is deliberately unfashionable.
I think, yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made that some of the groups that perform this are embracing a counterculture, that kind of lifestyle or image, especially when it comes to Border Morris, which is the more rowdy one, where there's a lot more of the kind of rhythmic instruments and banging of sticks. There's a lot more painted face. It's a bit more metal as far as Morris dancers go.
It's a bit sexier.
Yeah. It's like, oh, we like being the rebels of folk music.
The black sheep of the Morris dancing world.
Oh, we're tiptoeing around that topic. Very close now.
We're getting there.
I think this idea of belonging to a group, I hadn't really come across it in a psychological sense, because the stuff that I read was kind of more practical, I guess. Or not practical. Like there's a Medium article that says it was aerobic exercise for the brain and body. Although, strangely enough, that was written by someone kind of bigging it up over in the US, and why his group of factory workers in, I want to say, Wisconsin had taken up Morris dancing. Tradfolk.co also states a variety of reasons that are the ones that you might think of, that it's a bit of entertainment, that it's for people that have an interest in cultural preservation, and then also, I guess, the sense of community bonding that you've mentioned.
Which is sorely absent in most modern life.
They've not really made the psychological point that you have there, but I think it's kind of tying up to it quite closely, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's really about the dancing as such. It's just the vehicle that delivers community, ritual, participation, and identity.
I think people do, or some of the older participants maybe, I've heard poor things about the Gen Z crowd these days, but there's a lot of an argument to be made on some Reddit threads that it's also about, yeah, but it's fun to go out and with your mates down the pub, have a few pints and then do some Morris dancing. That it's kind of tied into drinking traditional English ales type stuff.
It's inextricably linked to pub culture, because that's where it's always happened, is around pubs, by and large. A public forum, which is quite nice.
I think that's nice as well. It's not like you have to go out and get absolutely tanked and vomit in the street. It's more like a few pints of mild, which is a mild drink, and then a little bit of an ease up with some jingly bells.
What's not to like?
All of it. It's fucking lame. It's fine. I don't mind it.
It's hard to argue when you put it like that. Something that's interesting about it, I think, is previous folk traditions was something that people participated in. You might not necessarily all perform it, but you were more likely to participate in it in some way. You know, maypole dancing and other harvest festival stuff. The community participated. And now, more of our traditions and pastimes, we don't participate in them. We consume them. We just watch them happen. You know, football on the TV, stuff on YouTube, people living their lives whilst we observe it. You know, I spend very little time out in public. I'm cooped up in my house for a variety of reasons, which I lament. I wish I could spend more time in public, but it's difficult to do in the modern world. The backbone of community was living in the same place as other people that you worked with, and you also worked nearby. Now we commute. So you can live a variety of places, to work a variety of places, and it's not like your neighbours also work at the same factory you do. So they're just neighbours. The only thing you have in common with them is the place that you live.
Postcode.
Yeah. The thing I have in common with my neighbours is that this is the nicest house that we could afford in Oxford. So we're all here. And it's not really the basis for a community.
Community is probably the core word there around why people would do it and why it died out a bit, I think, is because, as you said, you live around these people, but you socialize with these people. You depended on each other as well. It's not like you could, in a small rural community, you probably couldn't be self-sufficient even if you were at a decent-sized farm. You might be the guy that raises the pigs when someone down the road's the guy that grows the potatoes, and you can't exclusively live off one or the other. There's always this kind of reliance on each other, on your neighbors, on your community, and then therefore when you've got a thing like a season to celebrate where things are starting to happen more, small pigs are coming along, potatoes are starting to grow, whatever it is, or you're planting them, it's a time for celebration because everyone's thinking, well, this way we're going to be able to eat for the next year, kind of thing.
Winter was hard for everyone. Everyone was suffering together, which, just reinforces the need to rely on each other, which we don't have now, for better or worse.
From a modern standpoint, and why would people do it now? Some of those reasons are still there, like you've just mentioned. There's a nice little series of quotes from a guy called Nigel Strudwick of the Devil's Dyke Morris Men. He says that it's a fun and social pastime with the bonus of raising money for charities. So that's quite a nice thing that, including in that community spirit, they're also doing it as a fundraiser. If they go to fates, maybe they get paid to do that, or maybe they pass a bucket around at the end if you liked our dance and donate it to something worthwhile.
That's a nice idea.
They see a pride in keeping the old traditions going. And this is a good one, though. He said, there's a feeling of satisfaction when it goes right and the crowd is on your side.
Morris dancing, when it goes wrong.
Like, you're not Kiss, guy. No one's screaming
screaming your name.
Yeah.
Women are taking their tops off.
Third guy on the left. Third guy on the left.
Women are fainting.
He did say it's good physical 30 minutes or so to get your cardio in.
Going back to something you said about life in a village where you depended on each other, that was a community of, a couple of hundred people. You knew everyone in the community. You all had a role, maybe not a good one, but everyone knew who you were, and you were someone to a couple hundred people. And, we probably each know a couple of hundred people now that we don't necessarily live with, but our scope of the world has got bigger. Back then, most of your world was a village, and you might visit neighbouring villages, but you couldn't exactly fly to Ibiza at the weekend. And now, because the world shrunk for us, it means that our vision of our kind of global community is so massive that it kind of takes away all the meaning. That restriction of your world down to a few people is gone. So now when we look at dating apps, you can look at people in the entire country that, are up on the dating scene rather than just who's the most attractive bloke in your village or nicest looking woman in your village.
Or the one that's the least covered in pig shit, at least.
The one with the least sores, yeah.
Fewest bubones. But maybe this is why people have got such a fascination with reality TV as well, because all we really do is cramp a bunch of people together and they're there by forced circumstance, and you've automatically made them into a small community and they become tribal, and they do this kind of bonding that we don't actually have in a community anymore. Still sounds fucking dreadful to me as a complete anti-socialist, though. Your place in a village, your place in a community, what would I be? Fucking village idiot. On Tuesdays, I get to wave my penis at traffic.
No, I think you'd be the village witch.
There might be some truth in that.
The wise woman. I would like to be the village blacksmith. I have a sort of longing to be someone in my community. Useful. Yeah. Useful and known. Someone that people come to for help with fucking anything, man. I would take anything. And I'm just this anonymous blob that lives in a random housing estate in Oxford, and I'm nothing to anyone in this entire city.
Well, that's not true. Well, in that entire city.
In that entire city.
So you're something to me, Joe.
Exactly. My community is spread over cities in the UK and other countries, but my actual immediate community where I live, nothing. If I died, no one would notice.
I don't think no one would notice, but what's maybe slightly concerning about that thought is that no one would find you for a while because you don't know anyone close by.
No, I mean, my girlfriend would probably get annoyed that I wasn't texting her back and eventually might get suspicious, and that's the route that I would be discovered, or some other friends. But my immediate community, my neighbours might eventually smell something, but no one would notice if I wasn't coming and going suddenly. That's how little impact I have on the lives of my neighbours.
Well, this has got morose. Excellent. Good.
I knew it would. I just lament the loss of this.
You lament the loss of Morris dancing?
Not specifically, but...
but what it represents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Shall we look at the dark sides of Morris dancing rather than the dark sides of your soul and our British culture now?
Well, one more point I want to make is our cultural traditions have changed. So we've got things like the Sunday roast, football, which apparently is culture, And this I wasn't expecting, but Park Run. Have you heard of this?
Fucking hate parkrun.
Why is that? Bunch of happy people.
Why'd you have to get a group of people to run together? Running is a one-player game, okay? You don't have to do it
But it's community.
It's not. It's just people getting in each other's way and being annoying and virtue signaling.
But why do they want to do it?
Yeah,
together?
why? Fuck off. Leave me alone.
Okay, Andrew. I think they're leaving you alone. I think that's all right.
I wish they would. Do you know how many fucking times a week someone's like, fucking parkrun?
Well, they want you to come or just that they do it?
Yeah. You should join parkrun. You should join this running group on Strava.
So they sound like that.
In my head, they do. Sorry, just tanked your
But
point
anyway,
by being horrible.
It's what the people come here for. But Parkrun in the UK is something of a cultural phenomenon now, and it's kind of our modern equivalent. It's trying to find a bit of community in this shitty anonymous corporate world that we all inhabit. And yeah, it's nice. People choose to come together and socialize afterwards. And it's practically it's a dating service for some people, but for others, it's just a nice thing to do, to engage with people that you live near. I hate running, so it pretty much precludes that from something that I'd like to do. But if there's something else other than running, I don't know, maybe some sort of rhythmic dancing that I could participate instead, then, oh, hang on.
It's okay. Loads of them aren't running anyway. They're just fucking
Shambling.
there to show off the latest lycra that they can afford to buy and get in each other's way and hit on each other.
You're such a misanthrope. I love it.
This is based on real world experience. I've gone out and seen it, so you don't have to. You can stay in your comfortable house in your community of one.
You barely survived. But yeah, let's talk dark side.
Well, you've now set up quite nicely that Morris dancing, aside from being a bit sad looking to the outsider for various reasons, is actually quite positive in your eyes. So how could something so light-hearted and jingly have a dark side?
It's a good question.
I don't really know that it has. I think people are projecting a dark side onto it, because the only really negative thing I could find
was the crippling racism that binds them all together.
Yeah. How they would dance around a maypole with a burning effigy of a minority on top of it. Fucking hell. Went a bit strong there.
Yeah.
But but it's not though. It's not. So in some forms of Morris dance, people have painted their face black traditionally.
Racism.
Right. Well.
Aha! We found it.
There it is.
There could be only one explanation.
This blackening of the face has very negative connotations now, and some would say it always has done. There is, unfortunately, little evidence that it wasn't racist.
No, that's not true. I watched a very interesting interview about this, but continue.
Some are saying that performers would do this or agricultural workers would black up their faces when they were dancing to avoid being recognized in public and to look like coal miners or chimney sweeps, maybe in keeping with the theme of the dance. But the reason you might not want to be recognized when you're doing Morris dancing, other than the fact that people would laugh at you for doing Morris dancing, is because if you were asking for money afterwards, it has been illegal to beg in the UK for a very long time in the past. So if it looks like in any way that you're soliciting money for jingling your bells at someone, you could potentially be bashed around the head with a kosh by your local authority.
Exactly. So when people have black on their faces now in Morris dancing, it's a callback to that tradition of people disguising themselves, their original identity, pretending to be a chimney sweep or a mine worker, and it's nothing more than a traditional callback to that. It's absolutely nothing to do with race.
Well, on the other hand, there are some scholars that point out that the face blackening became more widespread in the 19th century and was likely influenced by the blackface minstrel shows and racist caricatures which had come across from the kind of US influences in some senses. Not saying that racism originated in the US, they didn't invent it, but
they did perfect it.
There were some potentially negative racial connotations around it because it also kind of calls back to the name in that it was named something exotic from a Moorish land. They were people of a darker hue. That's why they have colourful and exaggerated clothings, because it makes it look exotic. And if you blacked up your face to make it more authentically exotic, that it's kind of racist nowadays to do something like that.
True. Is there any evidence though that that's what it was about? I suppose you've cited that there was an increase in it around the 1800s, the 19th century, you said. Could that just also be an increase in the amount of coal and mining and sooty-faced workers?
There's a bit on Wikipedia that I can't read out because I got enough flack for saying bad words last time. That's from opread.force9.co.uk and also in the Visit Herefordshire and Worcestershire 1957 dispatches.
Yeah, that's not a great look. I don't think it started racist, but maybe it got embroiled in that a little bit. I can see that there's some complications now. I mean, a lot of modern Morris groups don't black their faces up. They use other colours or just don't face paint at all.
Yeah, I think that's the point that some of them make, is that if you want to preserve the traditions, just use different colours.
It's not so important.
Yeah. The colour isn't as important as the, it's using it as a disguise. If that's what you're doing for the historical purpose of the dance, then just pick something else that doesn't have any negative connotations.
And the Morris dancer in the interview was explaining how, in his view, it didn't have any racist origins. However, this conversation comes up. He says something out of the 25 years he's been doing it, they've had 4 separate complaints of race-related stuff. So it's rare people do complain about it. But he says, if people complain about it enough, then we'll just stop doing it because it's not that important. I think he meant the face paint, not Morris dancing.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I think the title of this Guardian article from 2019 actually probably sums it up quite nicely in a single sentence. It's a bit, lefty liberal, but the origin of Morris dancers blacking up is irrelevant. It simply needs to stop. Probably about right.
I don't know.
This was the article that was talking about Broadstairs as a location. They've got a folk festival. They have like 60 acts. Yeah, 60 acts, 50 events a day. They sell 15,000 tickets. It generates a lot of money for the town, and there were calls for them to ban, blackface performing Morris dancing and border Morris. Broadstairs basically refused to because they said it's historical and it's a bit of fun and it's not racist. So this article, in part, was taking umbrage with the fact that this place that are holding a folk festival aren't putting some rules in place.
I don't know. I think if the people doing it aren't racist and it's not causing more racist stuff and it has plausible non-racist origins, personally, I don't really see that it's an issue. But then again, I'm really white, so...
Well, you're pretty white.
So, I don't know, maybe I'd feel differently if I was a black person. Obviously, the majority of black people that witness this don't seem to have an issue with it. I think they can probably understand that it's a traditional thing.
I think there's several very easy answers to this, in that it's not an integral part of the dance to have to wear blackface. So either choose a different colour, take it off altogether, or just do it in like cool smudges across your eyes. So you've only got like a mask or like a black strip or a black line, a bit like, I don't know, a Maori war dance or something. Then you're still harking back to the traditional meaning if you wanted to make it look a bit like your face was covered in coal or soot because your dance is from a mining community, without someone questioning whether it's a racist dance because you've blacked up your whole face. Like, it's so easy to avoid it. I don't know why anyone wants to make this their hill to die on.
Well, I don't think black people should have a monopoly on the colour black, to be honest. If it's my right to paint my face black if I want to have a black face. Like, well, what if I want to paint it yellow? Oh no, that's offending Asians. What about red? Okay, that's Native Americans. Okay, well, what colours can I paint my fucking face then? It's ridiculous, I think. Is it wrong if I wear a black shirt?
Not yet.
Not yet. I don't know. It feels like a slippery slope to me. I don't know. It's a grey area because I also don't think I want to go out wearing blackface, and I've got no interest in that. And I don't agree with people doing that, in the full traditional mockery blackface, great big red lips and minstrel stuff. That does seem wrong to me. And if I happen to want to paint my face like that, I think that would be very naive and wrong of me. So I don't know exactly where the dividing line is, but
I don't know. I know you can't please everyone all the time, and someone's going to be offended by more or less anything you do. I'm well aware of that now. Thank you, internet. But if there's a way to quite easily avoid it by making a small tweak, I don't think that's a bad thing.
And that's the approach that this guy was suggesting, who is a big cheese in the Morris world.
Big cheese in the Morris world.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. 60 people probably know his name.
Well, interestingly, there's around estimated 12,000 Morris dancers in the UK.
12,000? Isn't that more than Hell's Angels?
It's actually around the same number of global Hell's Angels. We should make them fight for supremacy of subculture.
There's as many Morris dancers as Hell's Angels. Watch out, Hell's Angels. You'll be the ones getting patched over. One day you're riding a Harley. The next you're jingling your bells and clacking your sticks together while your mate shakes his hanky next to you.
That would be a hell of a crossover.
I bet we could find some.
Harley riding Morris dancers.
We've done Dark Sides.
It's in conclusion, basically, with Dark Side, there's a little bit of the smallest question about racially appropriate stuff, but basically, I think it's remarkably wholesome, and only dark sides really are kind of what surrounds it, the destruction of English folk culture. I think that's the dark side.
If you want to read into it that way in the preservation of it, there's articles that can go either way, saying that it's now surprisingly diverse, inclusive, queer-friendly, is not a sexist cul-de-sac anymore, as we said. Even Morris Ring has allowed in ladies since the 2018.
Since really not that long ago.
Yeah. But I guess in a lot of folk traditions and revivalisms, that it's almost like it's an alternative crowd that are interested in it. So there's no reason to keep them out. And I don't think that Morris dancing hasn't really come across as it's only fat old men in pubs that do it and they'll beat you to death with their Morris sticks if you're gay or anything like that. I didn't find anything around this. So
me neither.
Quite inclusive. Dark side is only the smidge of racism.
Just a little pinch.
But the bigger question, the more thrilling question, is it sexual?
Is it sexual?
Is it sexual, Joseph?
Miss Moneypenny. Well, you only have to watch it to know that it's not.
Yep.
Basically.
That's that answer.
No. So there's
even if I went into the YouTube search of Morris dancers fully erect, I think it would 20 seconds in have receded all the way back up into my body.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. There's some people think it's like a fertility dance, but there's limited evidence that suggests that. And if people don't believe it now, then it basically isn't. And yeah, it has no sexual dimension to it at all, really.
Unless it's super well hidden. I don't think there's any kind of Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code, underground old people sex ring that's happening after a good Morrising.
And if there is,
they're not talking about it.
And I don't need to know. It's not something I wish to investigate. It's not a prize I wish to win. I sleep well at night knowing nothing about it. So yeah, has your opinion changed?
I quite liked this bit I found from a search. It was like, as I was looking up Morris dancing in Google, there was a related search that just came up immediately, which says, why do people hate Morris dancing?
Why do they hate Morris dancing?
This Reddit quote from user JJNFSK on Ask UK Reddit summed it up quite nicely, I think. They said that it's associated with negative memories for a lot of people, being dragged around summer fetes by your grandparents, not wanting to have to watch the weirdos with bells on their socks waving their hankies around, and that it's possibly rather twee and old-fashioned, a different user said. So I think if there's a hatred for it, it's just kind of out of boredom and not wanting to see the old traditional stuff.
For me, I'll be honest, I moderately disliked it to begin with. For me, I guess it was a lack of understanding. It was impenetrable to me why anyone would want to do this, and in some way that made me dislike it because it was baffling. It was the unknown.
I think after the research, my opinion didn't really change. I guess I don't even have an increased respect for them. I guess I know a little bit more about it now. I know there are different types of Morris dancing. If anything, the border Morris might be the edgy fun one, but I would still wander off and do something else rather than watch Morris dancing. But it seems pretty wholesome, mostly just a throwback to old culture and traditions. And while I think there has been an element of exclusionism in the past, it's not really there now. So I
would you be into it instead of participate? So instead of observing, would you participate?
No.
That is what I thought you would say.
I mean, it's the boring, lame part of old culture for me. It's not exciting or interesting. I mean, I don't even like normal dancing, let alone deliberately looking like a prat for the sake of preservation while doing it. That being said, I don't really have anything against it. It's just there. It doesn't bother me. I'm kind of glad in a way that people do want to take part in history. And update the potentially problematic and offensive parts of it. That's quite nice. But yeah, I guess it's not for me, but it doesn't have to be.
I would broadly agree with that. I think my opinion of it has improved quite a bit now that I see that it's a preservation of a tradition and a longing for community and a longing for belonging. And, I think these are all good things. And I'm glad that we have people that go to the efforts of preserving our cultural traditions and still want to participate in a community. And I think we need that more than ever in this miserable modern world. So yeah, I've got more respect for it now than I did, and I'm glad it exists. Would I do it? No.
Are you going to go out after this and look up your closest Border Morris group?
No, definitely not. I think I need to find my community in other ways. And I love a ceilidh, a Scottish folk dance, but that's actually quite physically fun because it's very boisterous and physical. And Morris dancing is a lot more sedate. So it's just, I'd get my community elsewhere and I'd get my dancing thrills elsewhere. But I'm glad it's around.
And if you're looking for a sense of community, then you can join our little community by following us on social bullshits.
What a beautiful segue.
How about that? Currently, you can find us on X at Sub-Subcultpod, Instagram at Sub-Subculture Podcast, and our Reddit page, our Sub-Subculture Podcast. So you can feel part of something, feel part of a community. Tell us what you thought, what do you want us to talk about, and shit all over next. But you can also, while you're there, leaving us comments and abuse, as I've had recently.
Shit all over us. We like it.
That's a whole different thing
That's
that you
next
can
week
do on your own time.
On the Sub-Subculture Podcast.
You can suggest your own topics, and if we cover them, we'll give you a little acknowledgement, an audio acknowledgement.
Worth quite a lot on the black market. So yeah, it survives not because society needs it, but because enthusiasts decided it was worth saving. And actually, as people, I think we do need it, or something like it, things like it.
Very nice. It was a good rounding out there. Good little quote to end on, perhaps. So that's the world of traditional English folk dancing and its wholesome and slightly problematic themes.
Only slightly.
And if you enjoy a costumed caper, maybe you want to listen to us next time. We'll be going through the interesting, cool world of LARPing and LARPers.
Ooh, yeah.
If you don't know what that is, you'll have to listen and find out.
That's next time on the Sub-Subculture Podcast. Let's wrap this up.